to another episode of Inside the Recording Studio. I am Jody Whitesides, and with me, as always, is Mr. Chris Hellstrom. How are you today, Chris?
I'm doing good, Jody. How are you?
I'm all right as well. It's getting a little chilly out because it's getting to that time of year. But yeah, some snow's coming.
We actually had snow in the mountains here of LA night till today. Not as much as you did, I'm sure, but we are getting a little cooler here as well. So I'm welcoming that.
And speaking of cool things, we need to talk about something that has cropped up multiple times in our past, and I'm sure it's happened in listener pasts as well.
Yes, and if it hasn't happened to you, you're probably the offender of doing these things. And we should be aware, we're talking, of course, about preparing sessions when we're starting to record. Because it's where it can be a horrific task when you receive a session file or files to mix and things are, let's say that they haven't been treated with the reverence that they should.
Or just they're haphazard at best.
Yeah, exactly. So we should take care of things, and this probably makes us sound like the proverbial old man yelling at cloud. But as someone famous once said, it's like if you don't have time to do this beforehand, you certainly don't have time to do it after everything is said.
Who said that?
I wasn't going to name drop, but it was Chris Lord Alge.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. It's one of those things, though. And while that sounds obtuse, let's just dive into what we're talking about here, of course. The first thing is obviously sample rate.
That's a big one.
Yes. Sometimes you hear people ask questions like, oh, I just record in 44 and then I convert to 96 when I send them over.
What?
Yeah.
You've heard people say this.
Yes. And that's basically a drastic misunderstanding of sample rates.
A very big misunderstanding of sample rates.
Right. It shouldn't need to be said, but there is no benefit of upsampling after the fact because you can't add stuff into it. You're basically just making the file larger. If you need to be in a certain sample rate, like if you're working for film and TV, that's generally 48, right? If you're doing stuff and you have the room and good converters and stuff, you might want to consider 96. These are discussions that you need to have beforehand. If it's just your own project, I still say stick with what you got, right? And try not to alter it. But you might need to consider if you're sending it to somebody else and basically just be consistent.
Yeah, if you are sending it to somebody else, you have to have that conversation and don't deviate from it. That's the best way to look at it. If they say record at 96 and you don't have that capability, let them know. Don't record at 44.1 and upsample, as Chris has said, because that is a big problem.
Yes. And of course, there's also the dreaded thing when people are using samples and stuff. And, well, I recorded here and here, and now everything is out of sync or it sounds sped up or something. Mm-hmm. Those are generally sample rate issues. So we want to make sure that we have the sample rate set for an appropriate setting. You're mainly a 48. No, actually, you're kind of like a 96 guy, but you do a lot of stuff in 48, don't you?
I do. And the default for me now, especially for anything, if I am the recording engineer for an artist or something of that nature, 96 is my default. If I'm doing something for film and TV, generally I'll go 48 because they're not going to really care unless they ask for 96, which they generally don't.
Right, because they would have to do some downsampling on their end anyway because it generally lives in 48, yes?
Yes, that is correct.
Right. Yeah. So 48 is what I use as well, and I have ever since I started doing some things for like library stuff and things. And it's just 48, works. It's not super taxing on the system. It's a nice set it and forget it for me type of thing.
It is. And if I take a step further in terms of sample rate, when it comes to things like Dolby Atmos has two sample rates that they will work with. One of them is 48. The other is 96.
Yeah.
The difference between the two, though, at 48, you get 128 objects. At 96, you get half that.
Okay. Good to know. Yeah, I don't work in those formats. So
in spatial audio and the Atmos mixing, that is something to know. You can't work willy-nilly with it. You can't work in 44.1. You can't work in 88.2. You can't work at 192. It is 48 or 96, and it is that strictly at this point in time when this was recorded.
There you go. Yeah, I would say also one thing that might be advantageous for you to go into like 96 is if you are doing drastic pitch shifting and mangling of audio. It's good to have the extra sample rate to deal with there, and you might get a little bit better results and not get as much graininess or digital artifacts when you're doing extreme processing. Just something to think about, but less so when you're dealing with recording music and stuff. Then, of course, it's good too, but it is a little bit more taxing on your system.
Sure. I don't disagree.
So, what's the second thing? I feel like this is the big one right here that we got now.
Track naming. That's a huge thing. I am guilty of this in my distant past. I open up a blank session. We all are, yes.
But that's how we learn, right?
Yeah. Sure. The thing that I'm getting at here is that when I was in the early stages of using a DAW, I would open up a blank session, I would create a track, and whatever order stuff would come out of my brain is the order that it would go down in the arrange window. So I would start with a guitar, and maybe I'd move to a bass, and then I might move to a drum loop or a drum track, and then I'd go back to another guitar, and then maybe a vocal, and then a guitar, and then a synth, and then a guitar, or something. It would just go, and it would just be this wacky random order.
And let me guess, they were all named like audio 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 as well.
Quite often.
Yep.
Just the track name as it was pulled up. The bonus of going forward, and prior to doing the whole template creation thing that we talked about in previous episodes, once I got to the template stage, it was a matter of writing down the names in some set of order. And then I lost the template stage again. Actually, that's not true. I do have a lot of different templates, but they're now set up a little bit more cohesively, is a good way of saying it. In that
you're talking about recording templates now. And
recording templates and mixing templates, both. But in terms of how I set things up, and you do it as well, there's a hierarchy to generally our arrange window and how those tracks will work out. But in naming conventions, I don't know when I started doing this. It was years ago. It's something that I try to stress on other people as they're recording at home and doing whatever it is before they send something to me. Take half a second, click on the track name, put whether it's a guitar, a bass, a synth, a keyboard, a drum, whatever it is, and then maybe a colon after the word guitar, bass, synth, drum, vocal, and then name it what it is. Crunch guitar, electric guitar, acoustic bass, acoustic guitar, synth, vocal, who's singing the vocal, lead or background on it. That way you have at least a way of categorizing what that track is, regardless of how you set it up in the arrange page. And once you export it or send it to somebody else, they'll at least know, oh, this is a guitar track. Oh, this is a drum track. Oh, this is a vocal track. It makes it so much easier on the end user to do it that way.
Yeah, I will push back a little bit on how in detail I would go with these. Mm-hmm. Your mileage may vary, of course. I want to really stress as well as like just naming the tracks and having it just descriptive. Doesn't have to be a long thing. One thing that I do, so a bass track is called, okay, bass, 4 letters, right? Guitar, GTR, and then I usually have a number after, like 1, 2, 3, or 4, whatever it happens to be. At least there's some basic things going on there. You can, of course, go on further by specifying this is verse guitar, or it's clean or distorted. Abbreviate there, right? Guitar 1, clean, whatever. Then you know what it is, and somebody that receives your tracks, if somebody else is doing the mixing, they know what they're looking at, as opposed to having 14 guitar tracks and it just says guitar, 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 guitar.
Right.
It's a little bit of housekeeping. And the temptation can be to get cute with this as well when you're doing something. You just want, oh, hey, look how funny I am. I call this track whatever. Don't do that, because it might be funny at the time, but just call it what it is, and it will make more sense 6 months down the line as well.
I'm guilty of that one in my past too.
Yeah. Well, see, yeah, it's, I've been on tracking sessions where there's a songwriter and it's their deal, right? So they go, okay, I want to name this and this diddly part from that. And it's like, no, we're not doing that. We're not calling it something like that.
Well, I wasn't referring it to being that cute. I was referring to the fact that I would
know,
spell bass, B-A-S-E, or acoustic with a K instead of a C. Yeah.
Well, those things don't really matter. I mean, as long as you don't call it something outlandish, non-descriptive. It's the only thing. Right?
Troll from under the bridge.
Yeah, exactly. So say, oh, okay, here's the troll track. Well, what the hell is that? Mm-hmm. You don't have to get really fancy and write an essay. This is outside bass drum kick, and it's this and this microphone so and so far away. That's too much information. Put that in the track notes if you need to put that down, which, I would say is a good idea.
It is a good idea. It's just not a good idea to put it into the track name in terms of...
Right. Yeah. Again, old man yelling at cloud here, but keep it descriptive. And if you stay consistent with this too, right? So it's like, what you're looking at. Mm-hmm. If it's kick drum, outside or inside, kick in, kick out, snare T, snare B, snare top and bottom. Be consistent. You know what that is. Everybody knows what that is. And it is such a simple thing, but so many people don't do it, and it's a mess. And that's when you end up with people yelling at you. What am I working with here? Fix it.
Yes, please tell me, what have I got?
Yeah, it's just finding like a system,
mm-hmm.
And you won't end up with the dreaded audio 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And so a little bit of organization on that front on top of your session is good if you don't have a template. Or even if you're at home, your creativity strikes you, just name the damn track before you lay it down.
I don't disagree.
Good. Then we're in agreement. Let's move on. What else we got?
Tempo. This is a big one to me because it's happened more often than I would like to admit or care to understand as to why people would do this. They treat the DAW like it's literally just a tape machine. Yeah. And whatever the standard tempo is that they open it at, that's what they keep it at. And it's likely it's not the tempo that they're actually recording and playing in. And that tempo most often in most DAWs as the standard tempo to open to is 120. Mm-hmm. And I can't even begin to name the number of times that it's come to me with a session in the DAW that I usually do all the editing and such in, which is Logic. So someone sends me a Logic session of their recording and it's at 120, but the song is in, say, 75 or 150 or 110. Nowhere, something different from the actual tempo. And all they did was hit record. And then they did that without a click track. They did it without regard to anything else. So I'm not even sure how you hit record and figure out where you're at and drop in another region and get it as a region edited to the front and back of whatever it is you recorded. The idea there is that when it comes to something like this and you or I or some other mix engineer has to pull it into a session to make heads or tails of things, if the tempo's way off, things don't line up appropriately when you pull it into the new session.
Sure.
And that's frustrating.
That is frustrating. Now, let me point out one more thing there. Obviously, a lot of people today are dealing primarily in the box and they might be dealing with strictly virtual instruments or loops and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
then this obviously is a non-issue because it will play back at the tempo that your session is at. But if you're dealing with anything from the outside world, whether that's you're playing your drum kit or you're laying down a guitar line or a few chords and things like that, if they're not doing what you're describing with the tempo thing here, it's a mess. And it is, I think, primarily people that have come from working on perhaps a reel-to-reel or a 4-track or whatever.
Ooh, I don't know if I'd agree with that statement, but I don't disagree that that could be part of the reason if they are of an older generation. There are younger people that do this too.
I'm sure there are, but I think the mindset comes from that where it's like, okay, you hit record and go.
Yeah.
That can create issues.
It sure can. The other thing that I would like to caveat that with, you said if it comes with a loop and it's a non-issue, it's not necessarily true. You can get backing tracks and pull them in as the audio file that they are at the incorrect tempo, and they will not line up regardless. And then you're playing to that backing track. That's more or less where I'm going with it, in that you play to a backing track that you just stuck in the arrange window in some random point, and then you play everything to that. All well and good if you're not using a click, if you're not worrying about how that's going to end up getting mixed later with somebody that needs to pull the files into an actual session that makes sense and that sort of thing. Or if somebody later needs to add something and needs to do it with the ability to punch in, there needs to be some sort of click track thing going so that they can get a proper count in. At least that's my opinion. Not everybody believes that, but I do.
Yeah, that's the issue that comes up, right? Because to play devil's advocate, if you're tracking and there's not going to be any sort of outside musicians adding to this, and you're a band and you're tracking live in the studio, you might say that, well, what's the issue? We're recording everything here and we're just going to overdub.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can see where you're getting with that, but it's still a good practice because chances are you're going to have a starting tempo so that you're kind of going for.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you don't go back and do any time adjustment, because you might be the type of band where timing is going to fluctuate. Your song might be faster at the end, or your Iron Maiden, and it's all over the place anyway. Then it becomes less of a deal. But those are fewer and far between. And I say still have a starting tempo just so that you can somewhat lock to your DAW if you're doing, let's say at the mixing stage, you're doing tempo sync delays or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have that, well, it makes it a lot harder.
It sure
does. Can it be done? Sure it can. But like you said, Jody, when let's say that you have a backing track going on and somebody's guitar or bass idea that they've come out and they've sketched out their song, and now you need a drummer to do that.
Mm-hmm.
The drummer's going to need a count in, right? And
one would hope.
Right. So, no, go. Right. So it's all of those things that we might not think about in the moment when we're so excited that we've just come up with this guitar riff that's going to set the world on fire, right?
Yeah.
We just want to get it down. But do the little prep work, because unless, I guess, you've received these types of tracks from somebody, you might not be aware of how big of a pain in the butt it's going to be to kind of sort this out.
I want to add a little bit more to this too in terms of the concept of the tempo and playing without necessarily the click and just randomly going off, treating it like a tape player or a tape recorder. If you're using MIDI is very much in need of timing information when you start to deal with certain things. And if you've recorded at 120, but the song is in, say, 93,
that's an issue.
Suddenly there's a huge issue in trying to correct certain things. And it becomes really, really, really difficult to do it. You can't quantize, and not necessarily that you need to quantize, but if there's a need to actually pull a section to or fro, and some things get out of the groove based on that, and then you got to go in by hand to do it, ooh, that just becomes a problem. My thing about this is that as soon as you start doing things like that and you're not using a click, which is all well and good, but if you're nowhere close to the relative time that you've used for the DAW, and then a mix engineer needs to make certain corrections, or you want certain things to be corrected, you've now made the job of doing that substantially way more difficult.
Yeah. If you have the mindset of treating it like a tape deck, this is how I record audio. In my opinion, you need to stay in that domain then, right? Because everything else that you're doing, if you're asking somebody else to do timing corrections or whatever happens to be, you are making it much more difficult for them. Can it be done? Yeah, but if you're treating it like a tape deck, treat it like a tape deck. Now everything is going to live in the live domain, and everything is going to have to be overdubbed in real time and all those things. And of course, same thing goes if you're like, oh, you know what, that second verse is a little bit too long, that's half that. Again, much more difficult if you don't have a constant tempo and things going on. These are possibly esoteric problems that you might think, oh, I wouldn't do that. I'm one take Jake, I just lay it down. And all the great session players always did it. Yeah, but those are great session players, and chances are you might not be. So set your damn tempo, will you?
Possibly use a click, or at least follow it a little bit. The reason why some of that has come out is in sessions past, where I need to pull in a session with the tracks that were created into a proper mix template and whatnot. Even in analyzing the tempo and getting it set based on whatever it is that's recorded, DAWs are not infallible. And analyzing the tempos and then trying to import the tracks accordingly can still shift things around. And are there players out there who can tell the difference between one or two samples of movement on what was played? Sure. They're few and far between. That being said, moving something can enhance the groove, or it can severely destroy the groove. And if you want to make sure something grooves, follow that line of thinking and getting that stuff set up. And if you're using other players in distant places, or you're doing tracking in more than one location, it is a really good idea, as Chris and I have said before. Use a click track. Don't record willy-nilly. Know what your tempo is. Try to stick to it as much as possible. It cleans things up and makes the mix engineer's life so much easier.
Of course, the bottom line here is also something that shouldn't get lost. Is like, your end product will be better.
Yes, it will.
And that's the most important thing, right? So if you take just the timing thing and the performances that you're getting out of it, it's like your end product will be better if the mix engineer doesn't have to fix as much. And if they have to fix something, make it as easy on them as you can.
That would be the hope.
Yes. And if you're the one that is doing all the recording, consider, like, if you're sending this out for somebody else to mix, why would you not want to make their job as easy as possible? Doing a little bit of housekeeping before you get rid of your masterpiece that you never recorded, you're just going to get paid back tenfold by the end product that the mix engineer will be able to deliver.
Oh, yeah. Speaking of things that will make life easier, let's move on to our Friday finds. Chris, what have you got this week?
You want to talk about esoteric picks?
Okay.
But yes, I'm going to go with makeup sponges. Now, that sounds like a joke, but cheap. Chances are your wife, your girlfriend, or maybe even you have them. They are amazing when you're tracking guitars and you get harmonic ringing from other strings that you don't want to be there if you're doing very specific tasks. Mm-hmm. Getting these, I can't show them to you, but you know what they all look like. Sticking those under your strings is a super easy and really effective way of getting rid of noise when you're tracking guitars. Especially if you're doing like acoustic guitars, you get that drony low E string ringing out when you don't want it. Just stick one of these bad boys under there and you're going to be good. So as odd as it might sound, my Friday find is makeup sponges. Mm-hmm. What do you got, Jody?
Soldano.
Actually, Revlon came out with, no.
Soldano, the infamous guitar company, has recently re-released a couple of items from their past. One of them includes an update to its workability. And these two things are the X88 IR and the SLO 100R. The X88 IR is a guitar preamp. The new functionality of it is that it includes the ability to add impulse responses to be able to be used. So you don't have to run around with a cabinet. You can just use the impulse response capability of it as your guitar cabinet, so to speak. This then runs into the SLO 100R, which is an actual power amp, also now rack mountable, probably was in the past as well.
Cool. I have the original X88 without the impulse response, and I love that thing. I haven't used it in years, but
you still love it.
I still love it. I mean, it's the sound I love. I love my Soldano, and I can't see myself getting rid of it, even though I don't do a whole lot of live playing anymore. But that's cool from Soldano, updating their lineup.
That they did. While we've got your attention, we ask that you go to InsideTheRecordingStudio.com and sign up for our mailing list. You'll need to be on our email list in order to be eligible for any future giveaways, and we'll make sure you don't miss any future episodes of this insanely good podcast. Send us an email at goldstar, GOLDSTAR, at InsideTheRecordingStudio.com with the name Preparation, not Preparation H, but Preparation, and you'll get something cool back in your inbox. If you have a topic or suggestion for Chris and I to explain in a future episode, contact us at the contact page and we'll put it into consideration for a future episode. With that, I'll say see you next week.
Thanks for listening, everybody. I'll talk to you later, Jody.